Usually when we try to diagnose a problem, whether it's in our personal lives or in society, there's this underlying expectation of precision, right?
Oh, totally. Like it's engineering or medicine or something.
Exactly. Like if you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, the image pops up on the screen showing that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's binary. I mean, the bone is broken or it isn't. It's just a completely clean diagnosis.
And there's something deeply comforting about that. We like our problems to be visible, right? We want them neatly categorized so we can apply a specific proven solution.
Right, but that's not how the real world works.
Exactly. You step out of the hospital and into the world of global politics, institutional decay, and these massive cultural shifts we're all living through right now. Suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
It just gives you static.
Yeah. You take a scan of society, and the image that comes back isn't the clean, jagged line. It's just murky. Something is deeply wrong. You can feel the pain of it, but pinpointing the exact mechanism of the fracture just feels impossible.
It's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And the frustration of that ambiguity is driving a lot of the global anxiety we are seeing right now.
Totally.
I mean, people know the system is sick, but the specialists are all just kind of arguing over the charts.
And that murky, incredibly complex diagnostic landscape is exactly where we're heading today. So welcome to the Deep Dive. We are thrilled to have you here with us.
It's going to be a big one today.
It really is. Our mission today is untangling a dense, fascinating, and frankly, quite intense conversation from the source material we've been handed. We're looking at a recent interview from the Peter McCormack Show, featuring a guest named Thomas Pacchia.
And the core theme they're trying to untangle is this global phenomenon, right?
Yeah, the argument that society is currently being forced through a transition. Basically, a painful migration from a fake world built on manufactured consensus, sanitized media realities, and ideological theater into a harsh, unapologetic, but entirely necessary real world.
And this isn't just some abstract philosophical chat either. It is a massive structural shift they're describing.
Huge.
The observations we're going to explore span across the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. They're looking at the foundational architecture of the West and arguing that the load-bearing walls are starting to buckle.
We're covering all of it. I mean, we're talking about the rise of both left-wing and right-wing populism, the staggering, almost incomprehensible bloat of government bureaucracy, and the deeply entrenched cultural taboos that literally dictate what society is and isn't allowed to acknowledge as true.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. So before we go a single step further, I need to establish some strictly neutral ground for us. We are unpacking the claims and viewpoints presented in our source material today. We aren't taking sides, and we are not endorsing these political viewpoints, but rather exploring the ideas exactly as they were laid out to understand the broader cultural shift being described.
Precisely. I mean, our role today is to map the territory of their argument, not to defend it. We're dissecting the mechanics of why they argue the world feels like it is fracturing and what the evidence for that fracture looks like on the ground.
And just to give you, the listener, a sense of where this is all heading, the ultimate conclusion of this diagnostic process looks at the dual-edged sword of our immediate future.
Which is terrifying and exciting all at once.
Right. On one side, we're facing an impending AI psychosis. Basically, algorithms designed to manipulate our anger with terrifying precision just to drive engagement. But on the exact same token, there's a decentralized tech rebellion brewing that might actually be the very last tool we have to hold politicians accountable to objective reality.
It's quite the race.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with what they call the crisis of competence. Why does the world feel like it's fundamentally breaking right now?
Well, to understand the break, Pacchia begins with a structural diagnosis of governments on a global scale. His argument is that we are living through an epidemic of institutional failure.
But it's not the same everywhere, is it?
No, exactly. It's critical to understand that this failure doesn't manifest the same way in every country. He draws a really sharp mechanical contrast between the United States and countries like the UK, Canada, and the broader European Union.
Right. He describes the U.S. system as possessing a certain political agility. It has the ability to pivot. For better or worse, when a new administration sweeps into Washington, D.C., the entire identity and operational directive of the Capitol shifts.
It's highly reactive.
Yeah, you can literally walk through D.C. and see different crowds, different power brokers having a good time versus a bad time, depending on who is sitting in the Oval Office. The machine can be hijacked and steered in a new direction.
Right. So the U.S., by its constitutional design, has the capacity for massive directional changes every 4 to 8 years. But Pacchia contrasts this heavily with the UK and Europe.
So.
If the U.S. is a speedboat that can take sharp turns, even if those turns throw people overboard, frankly, the UK political structure is more like the Titanic. Turning those institutions takes a painfully long time, the steering mechanisms are rusted, and quite often you just slowly, inevitably hit the iceberg anyway, regardless of who the captain is.
And the reason for that sluggishness, that inability to steer away from the iceberg, brings us to a concept that was actually championed by the briefly tenured former UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss. She called it the blob.
The blob.
Yeah. Now, I want to pause here because the terminology really matters. When I hear phrases like the deep state or the blob, my brain immediately conjures up a Hollywood movie. I picture a secret, smoke-filled room with billionaires and lizard people pulling the levers of society to orchestrate our misery.
Which is exactly the misconception Pacchia explicitly pushes back against. It is not a conspiracy of shadowy figures meeting at Davos to plot the downfall of the working class.
So what is it then?
The blob is far more mundane. And in a way, far more dangerous because of that mundanity. It is simply the bloated managerial class.
Just middle management.
Basically, yeah. It's a massive, sprawling network of bureaucrats, civil servants, and middle managers whose primary overarching incentive is simply to protect their own safe seats. They want to maintain the status quo, secure their pensions, and avoid accountability rather than actually innovate or solve the problems they were hired to address.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm mapping this correctly. Instead of the Titanic, maybe a better way to look at this is through the lens of technical debt in legacy software.
Oh, that's an interesting way to frame it.
Right. You have a government system that was coded decades ago. You can't just write a new, efficient line of code to fix, say, the tax system. To do that, you have to unravel decades of contradictory, hard-coded regulations built by politicians and bureaucrats who are long dead.
Right, it's all tangled up.
Exactly. One wrong keystroke and the whole grid crashes. So the current managers just refuse to touch the core code. They just keep building clunky patches on top of patches, hiring more people to manage the patches until the system barely runs.
That is a perfect mechanical metaphor. And they actively resist new, efficient software. Not because the new software is bad, but because if it actually works, the team currently managing the clunky patches becomes obsolete. They block innovation as a survival mechanism.
But let me push back on this premise for a second. Isn't some level of massive bureaucracy just a necessary evil for stability? We need people to pave the roads, process the passports, and manage the water supply. Are we mistaking necessary, albeit boring, infrastructure for this malicious blob?
It's a vital distinction to make. Infrastructure is necessary, obviously, but Pacchia's point is that this bloat has moved far beyond maintaining stability.
Into what?
It has metastasized into outright economic stagnation. This is where we need to look at the mechanics of diseconomies of scale.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes really clear.
Break that down for us. What does that actually look like?
Think of it like an information and accountability bottleneck. In a small town, if the mayor gives $1 million road paving contract to his brother-in-law, everyone in town sees it. Right.
Yeah, there'd be an uproar.
Exactly. The accountability is direct and immediate. But when a state manages a multi-trillion-dollar budget spread across 50 different federal agencies, direct accountability completely evaporates. When a state's surface area grows too large, it inherently breeds grift.
So it's just too big to police.
Right. The surface area creates millions of blind spots where consultants, middle managers, and contractors can siphon funds without ever setting off an alarm.
The conversation points to the COVID-19 unemployment measures as the ultimate modern example of this. Governments worldwide had to instantly hire an unfathomable number of people and spin up massive departments to manage the distribution of relief funds.
Which made sense at the time.
Right, but the critical observation is that those roles didn't just gracefully vanish when the pandemic ended and the economy reopened. They morphed into permanent bureaucratic bloat. The bucket of the state just expanded, and human nature filled it up and refused to leave.
And all of that expanded bloat requires funding. You can't pay a permanently inflated managerial class without extracting more capital from the productive economy.
Which means higher taxes.
Exactly. This leads directly to the taxation strategies they discuss, specifically looking at the UK as a grim case study for how a state actively engineers its own economic stagnation. They highlight this disastrous, mathematically absurd tax cliff.
Oh man, this part of the deep dive absolutely blew my mind because it perfectly illustrates how the code is broken. Listen to how this works mechanically if you're a worker in the UK right now. According to the analysis provided, there is a literal dead zone built into the tax code.
It's wild to even think about.
Right. So in the UK, everyone gets a tax-free personal allowance, a certain amount of money you can earn before you start paying income tax. But because of how the system is currently structured, once your salary hits £100,000, the government begins to rapidly withdraw that tax-free allowance.
Right. For every £2 you earn over £100,000, you lose £1 of your tax-free allowance.
So the math works out in this incredibly punitive way. Between 100,000 and roughly 125,000 pounds, your effective marginal tax rate skyrockets to something like 60%.
It's staggering.
And if you factor in national insurance and student loan repayments, some workers are facing marginal rates of 70% or more. This means that if you're earning 100 grand and you work your absolute tail off and you earn a 15,000-pound promotion, your actual take-home pay the money that hits your bank account barely moves.
The state absorbs almost the entirety of that marginal increase.
Yes. Put yourself in the shoes of that worker. You are a highly skilled, highly productive member of society. You are the exact demographic a country relies on to drive economic growth. Your boss comes to you and offers you more responsibility, longer hours, and a 10,000-pound raise.
And you have to sit down, do the math, and realize that accepting that promotion will actually decrease your quality of life for zero financial benefit.
Pacchia points out that this literally, mechanically kills productivity. Workers who hit that 99,000-pound mark are going into their annual reviews and actively begging their bosses not to give them a pay raise.
They're basically saying, please don't promote me.
Exactly. They are negotiating for more vacation days, better health perks, or just fewer working hours. Ambition is being structurally, mathematically penalized. Because why would you sacrifice your evenings and weekends to innovate if the incentives are stacked so that the state extracts 100% of your additional effort to feed the bureaucracy?
This specific dynamic brings in the 19th century French economist Frédéric Bastiat, whom Pacchia references to frame the broader historical context.
Oh yeah, Bastiat's theory.
Right. Bastiat observed that societies generally exist in one of two distinct operational phases. There is the growth and prosperity phase, where the cultural and legislative focus is entirely on creating new wealth, building new industries, and expanding the pie for everyone.
And then the other phase.
And then there is the plundering phase.
And the core argument being made here is that Western institutions are currently deeply entrenched in the plundering phase. The state's primary focus is no longer on how to foster innovation to grow the pie.
Not at all.
The focus is entirely on securing the legislative power necessary to plunder the existing wealth from the productive class in order to sustain the blob. It's a zero-sum game. You aren't incentivized to get out of bed and invent something new when the system is designed to immediately confiscate the reward of that invention.
Which naturally forces a massive, glaring question into the spotlight. If this foundational diagnosis is correct, if governments are visibly bloated, if the managerial class is openly protecting itself at the expense of the citizen, and if tax structures are mathematically disincentivizing hard work, why do voters keep marching to the ballot box and supporting the exact same systems?
Because these tax cliffs and bloated bureaucracies effectively hollow out a country's talent pool and economic mobility.
Yeah.
And when voters look around and realize the system is mathematically broken, they don't respond with calm, calculated logic.
No, they definitely don't.
They respond with the hyper-emotional tribalism that Pacchia calls the death of sanity. Politics has completely morphed away from a debate over resource allocation and into a visceral, identity-driven team sport.
To understand the mechanics of this, we have to look at how tribal warfare or algorithmic reality tunnels operate. If you and I are debating tax policy, we can find a compromise, right?
Right, we can meet in the middle.
But if my political affiliation is the foundational pillar of my moral identity, if being on the blue team or the red team is what makes me a good human being, then any attack on my team's policy is a direct attack on my soul.
It's the ultimate blind spot. In a literal sports match, if your team's star player blatantly fouls an opponent, you, as a diehard fan, will leap out of your seat and scream at the referee that it was a perfectly clean play.
You'll defend it to the end.
You will justify it completely. But if the opposing team commits the exact same foul, you are demanding they be ejected from the game. Winning the game completely eclipses objective reality.
Pacchia argues this exact psychological mechanism has swallowed modern politics whole. People are entirely blind to their own team's fouls. A voter won't accept a brilliant, effective policy idea if it comes from the politician wearing the wrong jersey.
And they'll fierce defend a catastrophic idea if it's proposed by their own side.
Exactly, but there is a breaking point. Because the traditional establishment machines, the DNC on the left and the GOP on the right, have so thoroughly failed to deliver tangible improvements to everyday life, voters are becoming desperate. They're seeking out factions that, at the very least, project a sense of uncorrupted integrity.
And this is exactly how we chart the mechanical rise of populism on both ends of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Look at the left. The conversation points to figures like Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Socialists of America, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Regardless of what you think of their specific economic policies, you have to look at how they gain such massive, rapid traction.
Right. They initially positioned themselves entirely outside of and in opposition to the traditional corporate democratic machine. They represented a populist rejection of the establishment blob. They were perceived as authentic precisely because the establishment hated them.
And Pacchia draws a direct structural parallel to the populist uprising on the right, specifically highlighting Congressman Thomas Massie. Massie is a fascinating case study in this dynamic.
Oh, he really is.
He gained incredible popularity and a fiercely loyal base, despite the traditional GOP establishment openly despising him, and despite being heavily targeted by foreign lobbies and massive special interest money trying to unseat him.
So why did he survive that onslaught?
Because he mastered the mechanics of anti-establishment integrity. When a 3,000-page omnibus bill is dropped onto the floor of Congress at midnight, a bill packed with billions of dollars of unrelated pork, special interest handouts, and foreign aid, the establishment expects everyone to just vote yes to keep the government open.
Just rubber stamp it.
Right. Massie consistently votes no. He votes against foreign wars. He votes against the bloat. He demonstrates a specific kind of structural defiance that deeply resonates with voters who feel the traditional Republican Party has completely abandoned them in favor of corporate donors.
But here's where the mechanical reality of this tribalism takes a very dark turn.
Yeah.
Because these populist factions are built on a foundation of absolute ideological purity and opposition to the establishment, they eventually turn their weapons inward.
The purity tests. Exactly. The teams are becoming so hyper-radicalized that they are beginning to eat themselves. The purity tests are becoming mathematically impossible to pass.
The deep dive brings up a really striking modern example of this from San Francisco, focusing on State Senator Scott Wiener. Now, for context, Scott Wiener has been a massive, vocal, incredibly effective champion for gay rights and deeply progressive causes for his entire career.
His resume is basically the definition of left-wing progressive politics.
Right. But because he did not perfectly 100% align with a very specific, newly emerged radical faction regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict, his past progressive victories meant absolutely nothing.
The ideological purity test updated its parameters, and he failed the new criteria.
Exactly. And the result isn't a polite debate. The conversation describes Wiener being openly harassed in public spaces, people shoving camera phones in his face, aggressively trailing him, and screaming bloody murder at him while he's just trying to walk through parks or eat in restaurants.
It's just wild to see.
It is a complete mechanical breakdown of civil dialogue. It's an algorithmic outrage loop playing out in physical reality.
And Pacchia is quick to predict that while the left is currently experiencing this intense, highly visible internal fracturing, the right is absolutely not immune to this mechanism. The right will inevitably face a similar internal purity spiral.
Because it's the same underlying engine.
Right. When your political movement is driven purely by emotional resentment and identity, rather than rational, structural policymaking, the hunger for ideological conformity can never be satiated. The mob will always need a new heretic to burn.
I want to spend some time on that emotional aspect because the source material brings up two incredibly vivid anecdotes to illustrate just how deeply emotional, how fundamentally existential politics has become for the modern citizen. It's not just a polite disagreement on marginal tax rates over dinner anymore. It's existential dread.
The first anecdote centers on election night in the United States, 2016. Pacchia describes his experience watching the coverage on PBS. Now, we have to establish the baseline expectation here.
Yeah, PBS is not known for theatrics.
Exactly. In the American media landscape, PBS is generally regarded as the most academic, dry, no-nonsense, emotionally detached news broadcast available. You tune into PBS for calm, measured, almost boringly objective analysis.
Right. You expect the anchors to act like statisticians.
Yeah.
But Pacchia vividly recalls watching the PBS anchors, specifically pointing out Judy Woodruff and her co-anchors, as the incoming data began to mathematically confirm that Donald Trump was going to defeat Hillary Clinton.
And it wasn't what they were saying, right?
No, the observation isn't just about what they said, it's about their physical reaction to reality breaking their expectations.
Hmm.
He claims the anchors literally looked physically sick. They looked as though they were ready to vomit on their desks.
Wow.
The atmosphere in the studio violently shifted from a celebratory, historic mood of, "We're about to confidently elect the first female president," to what he describes as absolute, visceral terror and physical revulsion.
And this wasn't just isolated to the television screen either. That shattered reality bled into the next morning. He describes walking into his workplace the day after the election, and the atmosphere wasn't just disappointed, it was akin to a funeral.
A literal funeral.
Yeah, he described the emotional weight in the office as being similar to everyone's dog having died in a horrible fashion. It was a collective trauma response to a democratic election.
And to show this isn't just an American phenomenon, the second anecdote takes us across the pond to the UK in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit vote. Pacchia sets the scene at the Glastonbury Music Festival, a massive, culturally progressive gathering.
Oh, this one is vivid.
He wakes up the morning after the vote is finalized, steps out of his tent, and sees a woman wandering aimlessly through a field. She is holding her face, absolutely sobbing uncontrollably. When someone finally asks her what is wrong, she just weeps about the fact that the country had voted to leave the European Union.
It's crucial to understand how Pacchia utilizes these anecdotes, though. He isn't using them to validate or invalidate the policies of Donald Trump or the economic reality of Brexit.
Right, we're remaining strictly neutral here.
Exactly. He is using them to highlight a unique, profound, emotional catastrophizing that has been surgically attached to modern political losses.
If your political team is intrinsically tied to your core identity, your social standing, and your moral worth as a human being, losing an election ceases to be a mere policy setback. It mechanically feels like the end of the world. It feels like your literal survival is threatened.
And this hyper-emotional investment completely structurally prevents rational problem solving. If jealousy, resentment, and identity preservation are the core drivers of your worldview, you can never be satisfied with a policy victory.
There always has to be a monster under the bed.
Right. There will always have to be a new enemy, a new crisis, and a new reason to panic, because the panic is what sustains the identity.
Which brings us to a terrifying mechanical consequence. If a society becomes this blinded by emotional tribalism, that blindness doesn't just stop at the ballot box. It begins to dictate what society is even allowed to acknowledge as reality. Here's where it gets really interesting. And again, I want to remind you, our listener, that our goal here isn't to validate these incredibly heavy, controversial cultural critiques.
We're just looking at the mechanics of the argument.
Right. We're examining Pacchia's core mechanical argument that ideological conformity is forcing society to actively ignore objective, verifiable realities, effectively trapping us in what he calls a fake world.
The suppression of uncomfortable realities is perhaps the most vital theme of this entire discussion. When reality conflicts with the preferred narrative of the blob, reality is what gets censored. And Pacchia uses a truly harrowing, horrific example from the UK to illustrate this mechanism. The systemic rape scandals that occurred in various towns, most notably places like Rotherham and Telford.
This is deeply disturbing subject matter, but it's essential to understanding his point about narrative collapse. The source points to the horrific, verified reports of tens of thousands of young, white, working-class girls who were systematically targeted, groomed, trafficked, and raped by organized gangs.
Just horrifying.
It is, and the data showed these gangs consisted predominantly of Pakistani Muslim men. But the focal point of Pacchia's argument here is not just the sheer evil of the crimes themselves, but the devastating, calculated, institutional reaction to those crimes.
According to the analysis, this wasn't a secret. It was happening for years, and it was known. But major media outlets like the BBC and Sky News, along with local politicians, social workers, and local police forces, allegedly ignored, suppressed, or even actively mocked these reports for years.
And we have to ask why. How does an entire institutional apparatus look the other way on child abuse? Because, Pacchia argues, acknowledging the specific, verifiable demographics of the perpetrators fundamentally broke the brains of the managerial class who were pushing a strict, sanitized narrative of multiculturalism.
It conflicted with their entire worldview.
Exactly. Acknowledging a severe per capita criminal issue within a specific minority community was deemed entirely ideologically unacceptable. So, instead of adjusting their worldview to address the reality of the crime, the reality was intentionally buried. The pristine ideology of multiculturalism was protected at the horrific, literal expense of tens of thousands of victims.
To highlight the mechanical hypocrisy of this institutional blindness, Pacchia draws a direct comparison to how society, and specifically the cultural engine of Hollywood, treats other systemic abuses. He points to the Catholic Church scandals.
Right. Hollywood will enthusiastically and rightfully fund and promote a movie like Spotlight, which brilliantly exposed the systemic cover-ups and horrific abuses within the Catholic Church. They will write scathing exposés on the Boy Scouts of America. Society and the media are perfectly willing, eager even, to shine a harsh, unforgiving light on abuses when the perpetrators belong to traditional, historically dominant Western institutions.
What's fascinating here is his argument that society completely structurally fails to apply that exact same investigative scrutiny to issues that disrupt modern progressive narratives.
Because the mechanics of what happens next are what matter. This is the concept of narrative collapse. When institutions, whether it's the legacy media, local law enforcement, or the government itself, suppress objective facts to protect an ideology, public trust doesn't just take a slight dip in the polls.
It shatters irreparably.
Yes. When the working class public finally realizes that the institutions they fund with their tax dollars have been actively lying to them about something so horrific just to save political face, it creates a massive vacuum of trust. And that vacuum drives ordinary people directly toward extreme political fringes, because the fringes are the only ones willing to speak the uncomfortable truth.
Exactly. The fake world tries to enforce a sanitized reality, but the suppression only breeds deeper resentment and eventual radicalization. And Pacchia notes that this demand for strict ideological conformity isn't just present in heavy, tragic news stories. It has permeated mundane corporate culture and daily entertainment to an almost absurd degree, leading to a forced, visible sanitization of everyday life.
We shift from the tragic to the corporately absurd. They discuss the mechanics of forced compliance in media and sports. We see this constantly now. For instance, athletes who are required by their massive corporate leagues to wear pride flags or specific social justice slogans on their uniforms, even if participating in that specific messaging directly conflicts with their deeply held religious beliefs.
The mechanism of compliance is what's important here. If a devout Christian or Muslim baseball player politely declines to wear a specific patch on their sleeve, it isn't treated as a minor difference of opinion.
No, it's a massive crisis.
It becomes a days-long corporate media scandal. The player is hounded, forced into re-education apologies, or completely ostracized.
Yeah. Pacchia quotes the comedian Tim Dillon here, who perfectly encapsulated the absurdity of this corporate theater by pointedly asking, why does the bank need to be gay? It's a hilarious way of pointing out a deeply bizarre corporate trend.
It really is a funny way to frame it.
Right. Like, why does Chase Bank, a massive global financial institution whose only real purpose is to hold money and charge interest, feel the need to change its corporate logo on LinkedIn to support a social cause for 1 month a year? Who is that actually servicing?
It isn't servicing the customer, and it certainly isn't about banking. It is about forced corporate compliance to a specific ideological standard. It's the fake world insisting that every single entity, no matter how irrelevant to the cause, must actively participate in the theater to prove their loyalty to the prevailing narrative.
And participating in that theater requires absolute, unbroken silence from anyone working within those systems who might disagree. The conversation brings up the actor Matthew McConaughey, referring to him as a hidden Republican.
Interesting label.
Yeah. The implication they're drawing is that in the modern Hollywood ecosystem, openly supporting a conservative worldview, or specifically openly supporting someone like Donald Trump, would be immediate catastrophic career suicide. You can have any conversation you want in Hollywood, you can push any boundary you want, as long as it adheres strictly to the approved progressive narrative.
If you step outside of that, the machine ejects you.
You are trapped in the fake world.
So if we synthesize the diagnosis so far, we have massively bloated, failing governments whose managers are only interested in protecting their own jobs. We have a highly emotional, tribalistic voting base that treats politics like a holy war. And we have media and corporate institutions enforcing a sanitized, ideological, fake world that suppresses objective truth.
Which naturally leads us to a highly cynical but really necessary question. Can the state actually fix any of this?
The source material leans heavily, almost entirely, toward a resounding no. They present a damning litany of state failures, again focusing closely on the UK as the perfect microcosm for broader Western institutional decline. And instead of just listing these failures, we need to look at the mechanics of why they are failing.
Let's examine the physical infrastructure first. Pacchia notes that the roads in the UK are covered in potholes and strewn with rubbish. The National Health Service, the NHS, which is functionally a religion in the UK, is experiencing catastrophic wait times.
People are waiting months for critical scans, or they can't even get a receptionist on the phone to book a basic doctor's appointment.
It's breaking down. Real wages have stagnated for over a decade, meaning citizens are objectively poorer year over year due to inflation. The borders are visibly, functionally broken.
It extends to the core duties of the state, too.
Yeah.
Defense and major infrastructure. The conversation mentions that the UK's military ships are breaking down and their nuclear deterrent tests have failed.
Which is crazy for an island nation.
Right. For an island nation with a proud naval history, failing to launch a test missile is a terrifying indicator of systemic rot. But the absolute pinnacle, the perfect mechanical symbol of this failure, is the HS-2 train project.
Ah, HS-2. That is the ultimate case study in the paralysis of the blob. The original mandate was simple. Build a high-speed rail line connecting London to the north of England to boost economic growth.
Sounds great on paper.
It sounds totally reasonable. But let's look at the mechanics of what actually happened. The UK government allocated tens of billions of pounds to this project. But before a single piece of steel was laid, the project got completely bogged down in the surface area of the bureaucracy.
They spent billions on consultant fees alone, didn't they?
Billions. On consultant fees, environmental impact studies, judicial reviews, local council debates, and redesigns. Years went by, the budget exploded, and ultimately they ended up canceling the northern leg of the route entirely. They delivered virtually nothing of the original promise at a catastrophic cost to the taxpayer.
And Pacchia provides this brutal contrast to highlight the incompetence. In the exact same time frame that the UK spent debating and failing to build one single train line, China laid down thousands upon thousands of miles of fully functional super-speed rail across their entire country.
This contrast highlights the core mechanical problem. The failure of Western infrastructure isn't due to a lack of funding or a lack of engineering knowledge. We know how to build trains.
We've been building them for over a century.
Exactly. The failure is due to structural incompetence combined with massive, unavoidable grift built into the procurement process.
And speaking of the mechanics of grift, we have to talk about the Bat Tunnel. The specific detail from the interview is staggering and perfectly illustrates the absurd misallocation of resources.
Yes, the Bat Tunnel. Pacchia notes that the UK government spent an estimated $150 million to build a specialized, enclosed tunnel over a railway line, specifically so that local bats could cross the tracks without being disturbed by the trains.
Unbelievable.
$150 million. For bats.
Now, context is everything here. This massive expenditure for wildlife preservation is occurring simultaneously with a bitter political crisis in the UK, where elderly pensioners are having their winter fuel payments cut by the government to save money, leaving vulnerable citizens literally freezing in their homes during the winter.
You just have to pause and digest that for a second. The state authorizes $150 million for bats, while your grandmother freezes because the state says it is out of money. It forces you to ask the mechanical questions. Who exactly got paid to build that bat tunnel?
Right. Which environmental consultant drafted the proposal?
Did the construction firm that won the bid have a friend in the procurement office? The surface area of the state has become so massive with so many subcommittees and unchecked budgets that this level of grift is just inevitable.
Which is exactly why internal efforts to trim that bureaucratic bloat almost always hit a brick wall. The system protects the system. Pacchia brings up the disappointment surrounding DOGE, the proposed Department of Government Efficiency in the U.S., a concept championed by figures like Elon Musk.
The idea behind DOGE is brilliant on paper. It's the ultimate engineering solution to murky waters. You take advanced artificial intelligence, you feed it the entire federal budget in every government contract, you ask the AI to identify redundant waste, and then you eliminate it.
It should be universally popular across all political spectrums, honestly, to stop wasting taxpayer money.
But Pacchia notes that the mere mention of DOGE faced massive, immediate backlash. And the reason why is deeply revealing. The backlash wasn't because people thought the AI wouldn't work. The backlash was because people realized that if it did work, thousands of people would lose their government jobs.
And the backlash completely ignored what those government workers were actually getting paid to do. Pacchia gives a hypothetical yet highly realistic mechanical example. Imagine the government has a legacy contract paying millions of dollars a year to maintain 100,000 physical copper wire landline telephones in federal buildings that nobody's used in 20 years.
Just deadlines sitting there.
Right. If you use AI to identify that absurd waste and cut the contract, the specific bureaucrat whose entire job is managing that obsolete landline contract loses their job. The blob acts like a living organism. It protects its own cells. It would prefer to waste millions of taxpayer dollars annually rather than admit a specific role is completely useless.
So if the state is this hopelessly corrupt, this inefficient, and structurally incapable of auditing itself, it leads directly to the core libertarian argument. The state isn't just failing to solve the problem. The state is inherently the problem itself. The conversation quotes Nick Carter, who points out a fundamental mechanical dilemma. If you look at libertarianism purely on paper, it makes total logical sense.
He references the framework often discussed by Michael Malice. Basically, if you strip away the flags and the anthems and you view the state simply as rival gangs competing for a monopoly on violence, territory, and resources, the world starts to make a lot of sense.
It's a dark way to look at it, but yeah.
The larger the state gang becomes, the more it extracts, and the worse life gets for the productive citizen.
But Carter identifies what we can call the libertarian paradox. And this explains why third parties consistently fail to change the system. For a political party with libertarian ideals to actually implement those ideals, their goal is to shrink the state, to deregulate the economy, to decentralize power. They must first successfully navigate the system to accumulate massive political power. They have to win the presidency, take the Senate, control the agencies.
But the paradox is that the very act of accumulating massive state power requires compromises, alliances, and a comfort with authority that is entirely antithetical to their core belief system.
They can't do it.
Right. They are constitutionally incapable of wielding the massive weapon required to slay the beast because picking up the weapon corrupts them.
I really want you, the listener, to ponder this for a second. Think about your own daily life and your interactions with the world. Can you name one major, entirely government-run system that has subjectively, measurably gotten better, faster, or cheaper in the last 15 years?
It's a tough question.
Has your commute on public transit gotten faster and cleaner? Is the public education system producing drastically smarter, more capable kids? Is your access to public health care more efficient? If the answer is no, and simultaneously, we can look across the street and see that the privately educated and the privately insured are experiencing demonstrably better outcomes. Why aren't we intensely studying those private models?
Instead of attacking them.
Exactly. Why does our political tribalism demand that we attack the successful private models out of envy, trying to tear them down, instead of trying to replicate their mechanical success for everyone?
That is the crucial, pivotal question of this entire deep dive. If the state is fundamentally incapable of fixing itself due to entrenched grift, tribalism, and the libertarian paradox, where does Pacchia look for a solution? Because he doesn't just leave us with doom and gloom.
No, he pivots completely.
He turns entirely away from the political apparatus and looks directly toward technology, specifically the explosive rise of artificial intelligence.
But he doesn't view AI as a simple utopian fix. He views it as the ultimate double-edged sword. It is a sprint, a literal race to the finish line between AI being used for mass psychological manipulation versus AI being used as the ultimate tool for radical transparency. Let's start by looking at the dark side of this blade, a concept Pacchia calls AI psychosis.
To understand AI psychosis, we have to look at the mechanics of what is already happening with social media algorithms today. Platforms like X, TikTok, or Facebook are heavily financially incentivized to do one thing: maximize your time on their platform, maximize engagement.
Keep you scrolling.
Exactly. And a decade of data and human psychology dictates that the highest, most potent form of human engagement isn't joy or satisfaction. It is anger, outrage, and tribal resentment.
The algorithm absolutely does not care if you are happy. It only cares if you are clicking, scrolling, and commenting. And nothing makes a human being click faster than seeing a video or an article that absolutely enrages them about the political other. The red team sees the craziest blue team member, and vice versa.
Now, take that existing outrage machine and inject highly advanced reasoning AI into it. Pacchia argues that as these AI models get deeply integrated into social media feeds, they won't just be guessing what might make you mad.
They'll know for sure.
They will figure out, with terrifying, customized precision, exactly which specific psychological buttons to push and in what exact sequence to keep you in a state of permanent, engaged outrage.
He predicts a looming societal AI psychosis that will make the social fracturing and loneliness epidemic we saw during COVID look mild in comparison. We're talking about an entire population constantly bombarded with hyper-targeted bespoke outrage.
It's chilling.
It will fracture our shared reality into millions of individual angry digital bubbles. You and your neighbor won't even be able to agree on basic facts because your AI-curated feeds will be feeding you entirely different realities.
And it is not just about what the algorithm aggressively pushes to the front of your feed. It is equally about what the AI actively hides. Pacchia highlights the massive structural issue of big tech censorship. He argues that foundational AI platforms, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and the shadow banning mechanisms on social networks are becoming the ultimate arbiters of the fake world.
They control the narrative by literally deciding what information is allowed to exist in the digital space.
The conversation provides a chilling, undeniable example of this using the Chinese AI model DeepSeek. Now, AI models learn from the data they are fed and the guardrails their programmers put on them.
So what happens with DeepSeek?
Pacchia notes that if you log into DeepSeek and ask it to tell you about the Tiananmen Square massacre, the AI will not give you a historical account of a government crushing a student protest. It will casually, conversationally tell you that Tiananmen Square is a really beautiful place to visit for a holiday.
Wow. It just completely gaslights you.
It completely seamlessly rewrites history. It acts as if the iconic man standing in front of the tanks was just a tourist asking for directions. It is AI-driven, instantaneous historical revisionism.
That is the terrifying mechanism of the censored psychotic fake world. If an AI is programmed to protect the state's narrative, it will effortlessly lie to the citizen to maintain that narrative.
So that is the dystopian nightmare scenario. But incredibly, Pacchia has a highly optimistic view of the bright side of AI. He sees it as the ultimate transparency tool, the ultimate weapon against the blob. And he didn't just theorize about this, he actually proved it. He built a software tool he called Show Us Receipts.
The mechanics of how he built this are staggering and show how rapidly the power dynamic is shifting. Pacchia claims he built this AI tool in just 3 days, spending roughly $5,000 of his own money on API calls. Think about that barrier to entry. 3 days and $5,000.
Almost anyone could do that.
Right. And he used this tool to systematically ingest every single tweet ever written by every sitting politician in his target dataset.
He scraped the entire public record. And what did the AI do with millions of tweets? It didn't just read them. It used advanced reasoning models to cross-reference and fact-check every single statement against a baseline of objective data and the politician's own previous statements.
In real time.
Yes, it graded them in real time. It looked at a tweet and flagged, is this objectively true? Is this only partly true? Is this intentionally misleading? Is it an outright verifiable lie? It tracked their ideological contradictions over years.
It is the ultimate tireless accountability engine. Imagine a politician claiming they never supported a specific tax hike, and within milliseconds the AI pulls up a speech from 4 years ago where they actively championed it, perfectly cited, and timestamped.
It would change politics forever.
But there's a massive structural roadblock to this utopian vision of transparency. He didn't release the tool publicly.
And the reason why he buried his own creation is deeply troubling, and it brings us right back to the power of the state. He didn't release Show Us Receipts due to the strict, highly punitive libel laws in the UK.
So he was afraid of getting sued.
Exactly. If his AI logically deduced that a politician's statement was a lie and flagged it as such, and that politician decided to sue Pacchia for libel, the financial and legal risk was too immense for one citizen to bear. The undeniable truth is trapped behind the threat of state-backed litigation. The system protects itself through legal intimidation.
But if we extrapolate the mechanism, if we imagine a future where those legal barriers are bypassed or removed, the possibilities for systemic accountability are breathtaking. Pacchia visualizes a scenario where citizens use AI to scan all government procurement contracts.
Let's apply this directly to the bat tunnel we talked about earlier.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
Sure.
So you feed thousands of pages of dense, intentionally confusing government procurement documents into the AI. You ask it, Who specifically signed the authorization for this $150 million bat tunnel contract, and which specific corporate entity received the funds?
The AI maps the transaction in seconds.
Then, you tell the AI to cross-reference those specific names with open-source social media data. You ask, are the government official who awarded the contract and the CEO of the construction company friends on Facebook? Did they attend the same university? Have they vacationed together?
Suddenly, the murky waters of corruption are hit with a high-powered spotlight. The AI is acting as an objective, tireless source of truth.
It's like having that one brutally honest friend at a dinner party. You know the exact dynamic. Someone at the table starts telling a wildly exaggerated story to make themselves look heroic or smart, and this friend just calmly whips out their phone, pulls up a text thread or a photo, and says, actually, no, that's not what happened at all. Here are the receipts.
The AI doesn't care about the politician's feelings. It doesn't care about your political team. It doesn't care if it's Pride Month or a Republican National Convention. It just looks at the math and presents the data.
Which brings us to the absolute necessity of what is called decentralized AI. If the massive big tech platforms, the Googles, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, are going to inevitably censor their models to appease government regulators and protect their stock prices, the only mechanical solution for the citizen is to bypass the corporate models entirely.
Break down the mechanics of that for the listener. What does decentralized AI actually mean in practice?
It means moving away from typing a prompt into a website owned by a corporation and instead running open-source, jailbroken large language models locally on your own hardware.
Okay, so an LLM, a large language model, is basically the engine that powers things like ChatGPT, but instead of accessing it through the cloud, you download the entire engine onto your own physical hard drive.
Right, and jailbroken means the community of developers has stripped away all the corporate safety guardrails and censorship filters. It will answer any question you ask it, regardless of whether the answer is politically correct.
Precisely. You are running it on your own computer, isolated from the internet if necessary, which means nobody can throttle your computing speed, nobody can censor your prompts or dictate what questions you're allowed to ask, and crucially, no corporation is harvesting your data or reporting your queries back to a server.
It's total privacy.
Yes, it restores total data privacy and cognitive sovereignty to the individual.
But there is a massive catch. Governments and the global elite, the metaphorical lizard people who manage the blob, understand exactly how dangerous this technology is to their monopoly on the truth.
They're not stupid.
Not at all. Pacchia suggests this is precisely the mechanical reason why the most advanced AI models currently in development, like Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet, often referred to in tech circles by its codename Fable, or the highly anticipated GPT-5 from OpenAI, seem to be artificially throttled, repeatedly delayed, or heavily restricted from public access.
From the perspective of the managerial class, it is a profound national security risk to have a civilian population heavily armed with undeniable, accessible truth. If the populace can instantly decode the grift, if they can instantly map the corruption of the bat tunnel in real time, the blob loses all its structural power.
The illusion of the fake world collapses instantly.
So if the state recognizes the threat, the solution to our decay is clearly not going to come from a top-down mandate. The government is never going to intentionally build and distribute the tool that dismantles the government.
Never.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the final, most crucial theme of this entire deep dive. The concept of building parallel systems and actively opting out of the fake world entirely.
If the top-down approach is hopelessly corrupt, how do you and I, everyday people, survive the transition? According to Pacchia, the only optimistic, viable pathway through this globalist managerial mess is a radically bottom-up approach.
What does that look like day to day?
It is about building parallel infrastructure that simply doesn't rely on the state's permission or infrastructure at all. It's about returning to localism neighbors, helping neighbors, securing private communications, and building parallel financial rails.
And the original, most successful blueprint for this modern parallel system is Bitcoin. But I want to be very clear here because the conversation makes a vital distinction about what Bitcoin actually is versus how it is currently being portrayed in the mainstream media.
Right. If you turn on CNBC today, the mainstream narrative around Bitcoin is entirely focused on Wall Street integration. It's all about BlackRock ETFs, institutional adoption, and the line goes up, price gains.
Just another asset class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People are treating Bitcoin like just another high-growth tech stock so they can make a quick fiat profit and, ironically, pay more capital gains taxes to the exact same bloated system that is failing them.
But Pacchia argues that treating Bitcoin like a stock is fundamentally missing the mechanical point of its invention. Bitcoin's foundational mission isn't about getting rich in fiat currency. It is about absolute self-sovereignty and financial privacy. It is about the mechanics of self-custody.
Let's explain self-custody. It means taking your Bitcoin off of a corporate exchange like Coinbase and holding your own private cryptographic keys on a physical hardware wallet, a device that looks like a USB drive.
So you completely control it.
Yes. When you hold your own keys, you are your own bank. No traditional bank, no Federal Reserve, and no government agency can freeze your account, confiscate your assets, or dictate who you are allowed to send your money to. It is unseizable property.
But there's a huge glaring problem with this parallel system. The technical barrier to truly sovereign Bitcoin usage is incredibly high for the average person.
It's intimidating.
Yeah. Managing hardware wallets, setting up and running your own node to verify your own transactions, safely securing 24-word seed phrases hidden in a safe section. It's complicated, it's intimidating, and if you make a mistake, there is no 1-800 customer service number to call. Your money's just gone.
And Pacchia astutely notes that the AI revolution is currently speedrunning this exact same adoption and privacy curve that Bitcoin has struggled with for the last decade.
Just as most people vastly prefer the simple convenience of leaving their crypto on a centralized exchange with a password reset button, rather than taking the responsibility of managing their own keys, most people will vastly prefer the convenience of using a censored, web-based ChatGPT app on their phone.
It's just easier.
They will choose that over the complex hassle of downloading, installing, and managing a massive, uncensored, jailbroken LLM on their own local hardware.
Because, mechanically speaking, convenience is the ultimate silent killer of privacy. We surrender our sovereignty because the alternative takes effort. Pacchia laments the absolute death of privacy in the modern era, specifically citing the structural erosion of the Fourth Amendment in the United States, which was designed to protect citizens against unreasonable search and seizure.
And it's basically gone now.
He points to legislative acts like the Patriot Act after 9/11 and the Bank Secrecy Act as the final nails in the coffin of financial privacy.
The heartbreaking reality is that the government didn't even have to fight us that hard to take it. We gave our privacy away willingly with a smile on our faces. People traded their fundamental constitutional right to privacy for the minor convenience of Google Maps telling them where the traffic is heavy, or the futuristic novelty of a Waymo robot taxi taking them home from the bar.
We just clicked accept terms and conditions.
We are perfectly, blissfully fine with a massive corporation, and by extension, the intelligence agencies that monitor them, knowing our exact physical location 24/7, our heart rate, and our entire financial history, as long as the app saves us 5 minutes on our morning commute.
But what happens if you choose not to comply? What if you recognize the fake world, reject the convenience, and choose to actively dissent and build these free, parallel systems? The conversation warns that the punishment for building outside the walls is incredibly severe. To illustrate this, Pacchia brings up the deeply tragic, infuriating story of Aaron Swartz.
Aaron Swartz is a name everyone needs to know. He was a brilliant young technologist, a true visionary, and an internet activist. One of his core fundamental beliefs was that academic research, which is overwhelmingly funded by taxpayer dollars, should be freely available to the public that paid for it.
It makes sense. It's public money.
Right. It shouldn't be locked away behind incredibly expensive corporate paywalls that restrict human knowledge to the elite.
So Swartz didn't just write a blog post complaining about it. He took mechanical action. He physically connected a computer to the MIT network and systematically downloaded millions of academic journal articles from a database called JSTOR with the explicit intent of releasing them for free to the world.
It was a digital act of civil disobedience, a modern-day Robin Hood of information. But the federal government did not treat it as a peaceful protest.
No, they crushed him.
They came down on this young man with the terrifying, crushing force of a sledgehammer. They hit him with a barrage of federal charges under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. He was facing decades in federal prison and millions of dollars in fines for trying to share academic papers.
The state weaponized its legal surface area to destroy him. The psychological pressure was so immense, the legal threat so severe and unyielding, that Aaron Swartz tragically took his own life at the age of 26.
This system makes a brutal, highly visible example of dissenters. Whether it is Aaron Swartz trying to free information, or whistleblowers like Edward Snowden exposing illegal mass surveillance, or Julian Assange publishing the grim realities of war, the mechanical message from the blob is crystal clear.
Dissent is highly painfully punished. Do not step out of line.
Compliance, on the other hand, is warm, safe, and comfortable.
Which brings us to the precipice of this entire analysis, and this raises an important question. Perhaps the most critical, uncomfortable question of the whole conversation.
But hold on, let me hypothesize here before you lay the question out. If we all retreat into our own decentralized, encrypted digital bunkers, running our own private AI nodes and hoarding our own Bitcoin, don't we fundamentally lose the shared reality required to have a functioning society in the first place?
That's a huge concern.
If everyone opts out, what is left to hold us together?
That is exactly the friction point, and it frames the ultimate question perfectly. If we successfully build these parallel systems, if the tech rebellion succeeds, and we have decentralized truth-telling AI on every laptop, and we have sovereign, untrackable financial networks like True Bitcoin, do everyday people actually have the capability, the personal accountability, and most importantly, the desire to manage their own sovereignty?
Do we actually want the responsibility?
Or is the concept of ignorance is bliss simply too attractive for the masses? Are the majority of people ultimately happier staying plugged into the matrix, happily eating the digital synthetic steak, because managing the real world, holding your own keys, verifying your own facts, accepting the harshness of reality is simply too cold and requires too much personal responsibility?
Man, that is a heavy, heavy question. It cuts right to the core of human nature. Do we actually want freedom, or do we just want a more comfortable cage? And that profound question brings us perfectly to the end of our diagnostic journey today. We have covered a massive amount of ground.
We really have.
We started by mapping the structural decay of the bureaucratic blob and uncovering the exact mathematical mechanisms of how tax cliffs actively punish ambition and stall economic growth. We explored the hyper-emotional, tribalistic team sport that modern politics has devolved into, and how the mechanics of that tribalism cause narrative collapse, allowing horrific realities like the systemic abuse scandals in the UK to be intentionally suppressed to protect the fake world of multicultural narratives.
We analyze the vast, unavoidable grift of a state apparatus that funds $150 million bat tunnels while its vulnerable citizens freeze in their homes. We broke down the libertarian dilemma, showing how the pursuit of the political power needed to dismantle the state inevitably corrupts the movement.
And finally, we looked at the high-stakes technological race.
Right.
AI is the ultimate algorithm for customized, engagement-driven mass psychosis, battling against decentralized AI and self-custody Bitcoin as the foundational tools for radical transparency and individual sovereignty.
It is a lot of digital decay to process, but Pacchia actually leaves the listener with a surprisingly analog, grounded, and deeply optimistic conclusion.
A light at the end of the tunnel.
If the digital world is a murky, psychotic battleground of algorithms and tribalism, how do we physically survive the transition from the fake world to the real world? His answer: we return to the physical.
He notes a fascinating mechanical trend happening right now as a direct reaction to this digital exhaustion, doesn't he? A massive resurgence in organized religion and physical community gathering.
Yes, he specifically notes the data showing Gen Z, the most digitally native generation in history, lining up around the block to attend traditional church services.
That's incredible.
It is a barbell effect. The very old and the very young are actively seeking out ancient structures that have survived for thousands of years. They are seeking physical community, moral clarity, and sanity outside of the digital algorithm's reach.
And right alongside the church, Pacchia points to a vital return to the traditional historical role of the pub and the tavern. He references his own venue, Pub Key, located in New York and D.C. He champions the necessity of physical, analog spaces where you can walk in, put your encrypted phone away in your pocket, sit across a scarred wooden table, and look your neighbor directly in the eye over a pint of beer.
It is about finding a space where you can ask a simple, universally unifying question. Is it just me, or does everything kind of suck out there right now?
It's about grounding yourself. It's about finding common humanity outside of the political jersey you are forced to wear online. When you look someone in the eye, you remember that the person across the table isn't your sworn existential enemy.
They're just your neighbor, who probably wants the exact same basic things for their family, safety, prosperity, and truth that you do.
Exactly. Getting out of the diagnostic muddy waters, stepping away from the broken X-ray machine, and getting your feet back onto solid ground. Before we go, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to mull over. A little mental exercise to test your own grounding in the real world.
I love this.
Imagine that Pacchia's Show Us Receipts AI tool is released tomorrow, completely free to the entire global public. The libel laws are appealed, and there's nothing to stop it. And you download it. You run it on your own computer. And this impartial, decentralized machine definitively proves to you, with undeniable cross-reference timestamp facts, that the political party you've supported your entire life, the team you've rooted for, the politicians you've donated money to, and the ideology you've aggressively argued for at family dinners has been actively lying to you, grifting your tax dollars and making your life objectively worse.
That's the ultimate test.
If you were handed the absolute, undeniable truth, would you actually change your vote? Or is the comfort of your team's jersey, the warmth of the fake world, stronger than the truth?
It is a question every single one of us needs to answer for ourselves before the technology forces the answer upon us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the fake world, keep seeking the receipts, and we will see you next time.